Welcome to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I'm Kiran Kumar, founder and host of You're Not Invisible After 50. Despite the title, you don't have to be over 50 to listen to this podcast. No matter whether you're 25, 45, or 65, we can all learn lessons from each other to help us build a better, more fulfilled life. Come listen to the inspiring stories of all the phenomenal women over 50 who are kicking ass and making an impact. They are not invisible. I'm not invisible, and neither are you. So no matter what society says, life doesn't end at 50. In fact, it's just beginning. Welcome to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I'm Kiran and host of this podcast. We're all about showcasing phenomenal women over 50 who are kicking ass and making an impact. You'll get to hear all their inspiring stories why you don't have to be invisible after 50. So sit back and enjoy the wonderful life story from this week's guest. My guest today is Lauren Taslitz. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
I'm so excited about this, and thank you for choosing to be on the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. I am so looking forward to the conversation. So, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself to our listeners in one line or more, who you are and what you do.
I am a musical theater librettist and lyricist who is also a partner, a mom, a daughter, a sister, a grandmother, and a friend. And all of those relationships inform all of my work.
Oh, so exciting. And what a beautiful introduction, I'd say. So, we're going to find out a little bit more about you, well, a lot more about you as we move through the
Yeah.
podcast. So, in this podcast, we're going to cover your life story, the past, the present. If there was a trigger point at 50, may have been sooner, maybe around that mark, and what the future
Mhm.
looks like. And then we end with the bonuses, the tips. So, let's
Mhm.
begin wherever you want to start in the past.
The trigger point for me at 50, which is really not where I'm going to start, but is when I was 50 was about when my youngest child left for college. And I felt a sense of urgency. I think because I felt sort of imprisoned until then. um, I had begun writing for community theater maybe 10 years earlier. And when I was in my mid 50s, I had been writing full time seriously for a while and had written two full length musicals, taken all of these classes, everything I could take in Chicago where I lived, and had kind of hit a wall. And I loved what I was doing, and I wanted to keep doing it, but there was no reason for me to think that I would find any more success if I didn't change something. And so one hot July day, like I said, in my mid 50s, at around 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when I thought no one would answer the phone, I called the only MFA program, master's program in musical theater writing in the country, which was in New York, assuming no one would answer the phone. And somebody answered the phone, and I said, I know it's kind of late, but I'm wondering if I could possibly start in August. Normally I wouldn't ask, but I'm kind of old and I don't think I should put this off any longer. And he said, will you hold, please? Let me check. And he came back a minute later and said, actually, you could start, send your stuff. And then I got in and I didn't know what to do because I lived in Chicago with my husband and I had an 80-year-old mother and two of my three children. I mean, my whole life. And going to New York was going to be gone full time for 2 years. Um, and so I was torn and I called an astrologist because I didn't know what to do, who said, your marching orders are clear. Oh, the other part of the story, which I told you, which I forgot to say, was when I got in, I, of course, asked all of my friends who all said, of course you should go. Not that any of them would have gone, but they thought I should go. And then I asked my children, who all said, Mom, you should totally go. And then I told my mother, who said, How can you leave your husband? And then my mother immediately called all of my children, who called me to say, How can you leave dad? But then my husband said, Of course you should go. You've spent the last 25 years putting everyone else first. So anyway, I went and I was in school with all of these people that were the same age as my kids. And I remember about a year in, one of my teachers who became a friend and mentor saying, You've changed your life, and thinking, No, I haven't. Like, this is going to end and I'm going to go home. And it turned out he was right. I had changed my life.
Oh, we're going to talk about that in a moment. But can I just slightly step back? So that was an exciting point because when you're not invisible after 50, you actually made this life change at 50. But what led you to doing that? What came before then?
Before the 50 mark it was, it was very atypical for a musical theater writer, but it was, and what makes it atypical for a musical theater writer is that in some ways it was so typical. I had gone to law school. I was a lawyer. I practiced law for a while, but there was no way for me to practice law in a way that was interesting and challenging that would allow me to be present for my children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did other things, except that I wound up writing without ever planning to when I was about 40, when my kids started middle school, because the only middle school fundraiser was a show the parents wrote and directed and performed in. And I thought, that could be fun. And so I started writing for this middle school show with zero plans of it being anything more than that, and found I really was having fun doing that. And then I started writing for a much more sophisticated, raunchier show where there was a lot more talent in the room. And then I wound up eventually taking every class there was to take in Chicago about musical theater writing and lyric writing. And I started taking sketch writing at the Second City in Chicago. And I started taking improv classes. I wound up writing two full-length musicals with a sort of award-winning, excellent composer who's based in New York. Um, Writing and putting on these and making theater sort of had become my whole life, and I loved it. But after that second full-length musical with, like I said, an established and sort of award-winning composer, which happened to be about what I was going through at the time and all my friends were going through, which was saying goodbye to your youngest child and all of everything that entails, right, in terms of grief and walking past empty bedrooms and maybe worrying about that kid and what your partner's expectations are. Like, they think you're going to pay attention to them, but that's not your plan. All of that kind of stuff. And that, which is such a huge thing for so many people, especially women, it didn't resonate. It just didn't resonate the with a lot of the theater makers, because most of them have not had this typical life experience, right? So anyway, so my life had become the writing. I remember running into someone. I was working on this empty nester show, and my head, in my head, my company was the characters in the show, right? That was who I lived with. And I remember running into someone who said, "Oh, you must be so busy." I remember saying, "Oh, yeah, I am. I've tried to figure out this problem." And then I realized that she meant it was because, like, my daughter was getting married in 3 or 4 days. That was like the furthest thing from my mind. It was like, oh, yeah, that's what I'm supposed to be thinking about. you know? And, and it's just not who I was anymore, where I was living.
That was in your head. In terms, it's obvious, Lauren, that your passion was your writing.
It was the
That's where
writing.
the passion, you found it quite early, in terms of in your 40s or maybe earlier than that.
And the thing was, and I say this to people all the time, it was never a plan. Like, when I started writing for that middle school show, I didn't know I was going to write for the next one. And then I didn't know I was going to want to write full time. I thought I wanted to produce. I just had no idea what I would want next. what would be available next. It was everything was just presented sort of in the moment. And even calling NYU was kind of a whim, and I didn't think he'd answer the phone, right? And
Well,
if
that's
he
really
hadn't, I don't know that I would have called again.
well. Sometimes you don't know where you're going. Sometimes things just happen to you. And it's a universe giving those opportunities,
Right,
that
right,
presents
right.
itself to you. So what's interesting is that once you completed the course, what happened then? What went on from there?
Well, the funny thing is, I had all of this guilt about leaving for 2 years, and I really hadn't thought beyond that. And what happened was I never really came back home in some ways because I love those 2 years. I all of my collaborators and my mentors and my community, they were all in New York, and I was in the middle of things. And I mean, it would have been pointless and dumb to just walk away. I had to keep doing what I was doing. And I mean, so when the spring of my second year, one of my mentors, this guy named William Finn, who in the musical theater world is well known, he wrote Falsettos and 25th Annual Putnam County Spelling Bee, A New Brain. Anyway, he asked me and my primary collaborator to write a show for his cabaret space to be done that summer in August. And my primary collaborator, this guy, Danny Orsetti, who's a composer, he was going to be working for him that summer in Massachusetts. And since we were writing this thing, I spent the better part of that summer in Massachusetts in Finn's house writing this show that was called Regretting Almost Everything. And that was in 2017. And now, however many years later, I mean, Danny and I have written 3 other full-length shows, and I've written other full-length shows with other people and had residencies and just like all of these amazing things, right? And um, and now in March, Danny and I released an album. Here it is. Can you see my CD?
I can.
We decided to record Regretting Almost Everything, which had turned into a 2-person musical with Broadway stars, Beth Level and Jeff Blumenkrantz. It's a concept album, which means it has not yet been produced, but it's the story. I mean, it sort of dovetails perfectly with this because it's a story of a 50-year-old woman who loves her husband and likes her job, but realizes that she may have another 30 years ahead of her and that she needs more passion in her marriage and more fulfillment in her life. And she sets out on a quest to get it, and in my case, it was leaving right to go to New York to write musicals. In her case, it's because she needs more passion in the bedroom.
Sorry,
Go
Lauren.
on.
I just think that what you're saying and what this album is about would resonate with so many women in our age group, right? For
Right,
one thing or another, it would
right,
resonate. It resonates with me. It resonated with you, and it would resonate with so many other women as well.
right. Yeah. And I mean, it's funny because recently I've been thinking about, people always say, what's it about? And so you can answer by giving them plot. Um, or I can say it the way I just said it to you. Or if I'm trying to appeal to a broader base, because I think it does, I can say it's about love, sex, and kids, because it is. But most recently, I just realized it's kind of transgressive in this because what happens is, I mean, one way to say what the show is, it's about a middle-aged woman who leaves her marriage for better sex, and she gets it, and she isn't punished for that by the universe. And in fact, both she and her ex-husband wind up finding new love and being best friends. I'm like, oh my God, that would never happen in our world, right? That you could leave for better sex and not be punished.
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think the end of the day, it's how you do something, and I always believe in karma. And I think at
right,
the end of the day, I think one also realizes that, say, for example, a marriage has come to an end, a natural end, then people realize that they want to move on. But also, equally, women might actually realize they can't give any more, or a man can't won't realize will realize that he can't
right,
give any more to the marriage, and both
right,
come to this kind of stalemate where they think this is it. We can't be anything else now to each other. So is
right,
that right or wrong? The story, what you're saying, would resonate with so many women because women redefine themselves at that age. You know, they realize, okay,
right,
what's my marriage about? What's my life about? Where do I want to go? How many years do I have left? How am
right,
I going to
right,
fill those years,
right,
etc.?
right,
Yeah.
right. That is, I think, what it ultimately is about. You do
Mm-hmm.
wake up and think, oh, I don't have forever. What
Mm-hmm.
do what do I what do I want to do with my
Yeah.
time? Right? And especially if you're once your kids are not a don't take up your day to day, for those of us that have them, you don't want to waste it. You
Yeah.
don't want to waste it.
And also, I think the part of this podcast is even you don't have to leave your marriage. The fact is you have
Right,
to reinvent yourself in your marriage or in any other relationship or whatever, because that allows you to grow. And I think it's about allowing yourself to grow, because life is about change. Everything
right,
changes
right,
all the time, right? So
right.
I think that's really interesting.
I
Where
am
does
still
this?
married, but my
Sorry.
husband just I'm married, but my husband gives me the space because he knows it's important to me, that I need it, that I need it.
And I think that's really important because if you have that mutual understanding,
Right,
then you know that you both are going to grow in that space. So that's healthy as well. So I think, there's all different ways of making this work, whether you're in a relationship or outside a relationship. So
right.
where does this lead you to now?
Well, in some ways, like I said, it led to making this album, which, it was pretty much everything I've done, even within the context of the musical theater writing, is something I probably haven't done before, or much of it, or it's with people I don't know. It's always a surprise, which is great. So making this album, I had zero idea what I was getting into. But I mean, it was so much. It's one of those things where, if you had known, you would have said, no way, I'm not doing that. It's too much. Um, but like everything you wind up doing, it's it's fantastic that you did it, right? And I loved every single minute of it. I mean, part of the goal of this album for me was simply legacy. I mean, I've been writing for 20 some odd years, and when I die, I wanted something to exist in the world, right? That was sort of it just that because I'd done all this. But the other goal of the album was to create awareness of this two-person, easily producible musical because we would like it to be produced and we would like it to be licensed. And then we would like small checks to come to us forever. My collaborator is a much younger person, and he's incredibly talented. He's an amazing composer and orchestrator and arranger. And it's also a way for somebody to hear this and say, oh my God, who orchestrated this? Who arranged this? This is beautiful. I want that guy, to just make ourselves known and what we do know. Um, so anyway, so what we're doing now is continuing to sort of market and send out a pitch deck and try to, continue to create awareness in hopes that those things will happen, right? Productions and licensing. And then the other thing is I'm working on a new show, which came my way with a new collaborator, which is very exciting to me. And I am very grateful to have it because what I like doing is writing, not marketing and sending out pitch decks. And it was great that after the album was released, it's streaming everywhere, which was officially March 14th. I felt very lucky to have a new creative project that I could be excited about and throw myself into. So, like when I wake up, I do that first, and then I move on to the logistics of life and marketing. I mean, and when I went to school, I don't know how much time we have, but when I went to school, I remember a day where we all stood in a circle during orientation and we had to identify ourselves. And people were saying, I'm a composer, I'm a lyricist, I'm a writer, I'm an artist. And I was just standing there thinking, I'm a mom. I don't know if I could say those other those other words. It was not how I identified. But then again, all of those people, right, my classmates, with one exception, they were all just children, right? But I was a mom and a partner, and I was a daughter of an old. I mean, it just was. They were just. I was so defined by my relationships, and still am. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it helps you understand. I think relationships actually are the basis of every good story. Anything I want to hear. Um, so it's good to understand all of those things. But now, if somebody says, "Who are you?" I say, "I'm an artist and I'm a writer," and it sustains me and it grounds me. And if I don't wake up and have something to work on, I feel awful, like it loose ends in a bad way. I need it.
That's
I
what we
need it.
do. I think, I'm a mother. I was a wife, you know, but you also need to grow as a person yourself, right? And
Right.
post those relationships, or outside those relationships, because
Right.
then you satisfy your own soul and your own
Yeah.
need. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important, because you have to give growth to yourself in terms of the person you are and the person you want to be seen by other people. Like, as you were saying, Lauren, you can now say who you are. You can
I can.
define who you are
Yeah.
outside of being a mother, a partner,
Yeah.
a wife, etc., etc. You can actually define yourself in your own right. It's something that you've created for yourself.
Yeah. And it took a long time. And I have to say, like, my family and friends respect it. Like, my husband, I wake up very early. I come into my office, I shut the door. He knows better than to say hello to me. And when I say I'm working, nobody expects me not to work. My children call now and they say, "Where are you?" Because they don't know if I'm here in New York. Um, and so, I mean, it kind of has to be that way for me now.
But also, it keeps you happy, because if you're happy, then
Yeah.
everybody around you is happy too, because they know that you're getting what you need, and you can then give the best of yourself to somebody else as well. If you're unhappy because you haven't got your needs met, then you're going to be one miserable person, right? And you're not going to make anybody else
Yeah.
happy.
No, no, it was tough all those years where I didn't have that, whatever the thing was, because I made a decision to organize my life around being available to my children, before and after school. And, there it was, the decision was, what's the most important thing? And at that point, I thought it was peace of mind. And that was, I thought, what would give me peace of mind. And I chose that. But now I don't have to do that anymore. Now I can have peace of mind and do what I want to do or what I need to do.
Absolutely. Fantastic, fantastic. So we talked a bit about the present. And what about the future? So what does the future look like? Have you got any thoughts about, you've got this new project that you're doing at the moment, and you're back in writing, but is there anything else about what you would like to do, or any
No,
plans?
no, I actually love not knowing, and I don't like I don't like making plans. I think it's foolish to make plans because there's just too many variables. It just seems like
Absolutely.
it just seems like a waste of time. Right now, I mean, this is just a weird thing, but my son and his fiance are talking about like wanting to move into my house with me and my husband. And I'm like, that's cool. And my other kids are like, wait a second, that's not fair. I do not take any of it seriously
Mhm.
until somebody says I'm coming tomorrow. And it's the same way with theater. I mean, I will, I don't know who I'll meet. I mean, I might send things to 1,000 people. I expect to hear from none of them because
Mhm.
if anybody cares, it's probably going to be some guy literally run into on the street. and drop it. It's pointless to plan. Nothing works that way. But the flip side is you're sort of available to do what does show up because you're not
Hmm.
chasing something that's unlikely to happen anyway. Um, I like not knowing.
I think
I
that's a
like not knowing.
good kind of philosophy because in terms of law of attraction, is don't kind of think about how something's going to come to you. Just want something, and then let it come appear in its own way. And I think recently I've been kind of reading up about law of attraction and
Mhm.
vibrations and affirmations, and I just think, yeah, all right, let everything just happen in its own way, and it will drop in your lap when the timing is right, and let's not chase
Right,
anything because you then push it
right.
away slightly. Yeah, so I can understand what you're saying. And let's move on to the bonus part of the podcast. So what are the 5 tips that you would have for somebody who's under 50?
Um, it's so funny because when you asked me to think of this, I thought I have zero tips. And then by the time I was done thinking about it, I had like 100. But so, so here's the first one. And this one's from my father, which is don't worry about what anybody else thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second one would be know yourself. And I think the hard part is accept yourself, forgive yourself for being someone you are not. You might think you should be a better person like I do all the time, but I'm not. Accept it, right? And then a corollary, I think this is related, and this I think applies to a lot of young women, is don't let hating the way you look ruin your life. And if you can't learn to love the way you look, which I never have, then don't think about it. Stop counting calories and don't put up mirrors. Don't let it bug you. It's pointless. Okay. Number three, which I did not know, is try to be part of a community. And if you don't have one, I think one way is to take a class, or in my case, do a show, and ideally find yourself a community of women. I do think they will support you and lift you up. And ultimately, I think your girlfriends are maybe even more important than your partner or your kids. Um, Another thing I would say, and this is just because of how it happened for me, is if there's something you want to do, even if you don't have a lot of time, start doing it because you are building the thing you'll be able to do when your kids leave. I didn't know that's what I was doing, but by doing that middle school show, I wound up having something that turned into my life. And there are so many women, right, who they retire and or their kids leave, whatever it is, they finally have time, but they don't know what the thing is. So I would say start. And again, I started writing for this stupid middle school show and I just recorded an album with Broadway people, right? So you just don't know, right, where it's going to go. Another thing I would say is, which I did not do when I was under 50, is very common knowledge, which is cultivate gratitude. And I would say you get extra points if your gratitude is for a non human living being. So I would say thank you to the trees and recognize them and the sun and the breeze. Have names for your plants and say hello. I think we are not the only thing, and we should recognize and appreciate all these other spirits that support us. So
Absolutely.
those are my pre-50. After 50, I'd say have a sense of humor and don't worry about fucking up. It is better to try something and than to be bored.
Mhm.
Um, I the second would be today could be your last day, which is always true, but don't waste your time looking back or wondering why or having regrets. Do something today. It doesn't matter if you are listening to a symphony or starting to write a symphony. And if you are writing one, it doesn't matter if you finish or if it's any good. Do something that is meaningful to you or fun for you right now, today. No judgment, just do it. And then my last tip is don't take tips from strangers. The stranger could be an asshole, and the stranger could, the tips they have might not be right for you. So you should probably ignore everything I said, unless you're a lot like me.
I wouldn't encourage the listeners not to listen to the tips because we're all strangers. Well, all the women who are coming on are strangers to the listeners. But I would say, please listen to the ladies because obviously we all come from a place. I know it's a sense of humor, and I just do love it. I love the cheek of it all, really. And then Lauren, thank you very much for the good tips that you've just stated. They're just so valuable to different people, and of course, with all the tips that the ladies say and the women say on the podcast, some of those or a lot of those would actually appeal to somebody, right? So it's valuable tips. So I've enjoyed this chat and I wish you all the luck in the world. If I can be of any help in the future in any way, just reach out. But I thank you for your time and thank you for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me and for talking to me. I appreciate it and I enjoyed it. And this is one of those things, right, that you don't anticipate or expect or plan for. But that is so great, right?
Absolutely, because, I meet all sorts of wonderful women doing what I'm doing now. And as you said about a community, it grows and grows. And, I've found friends through this. So, right. Yes, yeah, it's really exciting because you don't know what's coming next and who's coming next into your life.
Right. So anyway, thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Take care.
Take care. You too. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Invisible After 50 podcast. If you want to hear more from some amazing women who are over 50, who are kicking ass and making impact, then don't forget to follow us right here on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Remember to subscribe, rate, comment, and share with other women through your social media. Let's spread the word across the world that you don't have to be invisible after 50. Check out our other services on www.you'renotinvisibleafter50.com and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. And always remember that life doesn't end at 50. In fact, it's just beginning. But wait, we have even more to offer. Join us and tune in to our other podcast, Shamelessly Untamed, a transformative series that encourages you to embrace your true self and celebrate your uniqueness. Make sure to subscribe to Shamelessly Untamed podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Don't forget to rate, comment, and share with anyone who can benefit from its content. Explore our additional services at www.roaringahead.com and be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, and YouTube. We look forward to you connecting with us. Thank you.